there, cool cats, it's Karu. I've got a new project that I want to share with you. So, you might have heard that Marvel is going to be bringing back the Fantastic Four. Now, slightly before that, I had tweeted something on Twitter to the effect of, you know, without the Fantastic Four in the Marvel Universe, it feels like there's this gigantic hole there. Well, I'm not saying that I was the one who encouraged them to bring it back, but suffice it to say, Chip Zdarsky liked it, and now Fantastic Four is coming back. The thing is that without the first family of comics, the Marvel Universe has been missing something. They've tried to fill it with things like the Ultimates or other family-type dramas within it. Vision jumps to mind, but ultimately, there's only one Fantastic Four, and they're coming back. Now, I had been missing them, so I decided I'm going to start rereading the Fantastic Four from the beginning and go all the way through. That is more than 700 comics, including annuals, including specials, including crossovers. Now, I was going to do a tweet thread on my impressions of the first few of them, but then I remembered that I have a camera. Hi, everybody. So, here's the deal. I don't know how many comics I'm going to do between these videos, but every time I've read enough that I have an idea or something that I really want to talk about and how this comic has developed over time, then I'll make a video. Now, I'm going to try to read all of them, and you guys are going to join me on this. But I have a feeling that after a while I'm going to start talking less about what they are and so much about who is the creative team and how they are affecting or contributing to the story and to the mythology of the FF. Either way, it should be a lot of fun. I can't wait to have you guys join me on this. So, let's get started. Alright, I'm not gonna lie, the first 4 issues were not very good. There is so much feat finding, particularly in this first year, that's going on, and you can tell that Lee and Kirby were really trying to figure out what they were going to do with a very basic concept. Now, that concept is revolutionary. You have superheroes who have real, genuine flaws that they have to overcome. The problem is that takes a little while to really find the characters. So at first, Reed is very much your 1950s style, "Hi, I'm a super scientist and also the hero of this film." And Sue is just sort of there for a lot of it, although I'll get back to that later. So this first year, 13 episodes plus an annual, is actually mostly about The Thing. That seems to be the primary thrust of this entire first year, although there are other things there that, again, I'll get into in a moment. However, Ben's story and heartbreak is really where this is going. And in a way, that's actually a bit of a problem since in the first 4 issues, the Thing sort of looks like a blob. Kirby really didn't get exactly what he was supposed to look like yet. So, my wife actually asked, is that Clayface? Because he does look sort of like Clayface in those early issues. That being said, yeah, the 3rd issue is probably my least favorite of this first run, or this first year, just because it stretches so hard, and again, more later on that, but everybody in it is stupid. They don't seem to understand what a stage magician is, and the twist at the end it's predictable. It's not very good. And I hate to say this about issue 4, because that's the return of Namor, and I adore Prince Namor. I really do. I love Prince Namor as a character. I've already read all of the books that he's been involved in the past, and he's fantastic. My theory is that he is very much, his story is a Greek tragedy told over and over again, where he keeps getting brought low by his own hubris and trying to rise up again. But yeah, there's another issue in the Submariner book that was written years later that essentially tells this same story as issue 4 of Fantastic Four, only from Namor's perspective, and because it's a different creator and because we have the advantage of time and a different era, it's told much better. I get the idea, and it's still a cool thought, but it also draws away from an issue that really should have been Johnny-centered, to become more about Reed, Sue, and the Submariner. And that's the other major plot point that is hit home this first year, is that love triangle. Speaking of love triangles, there's actually one that was completely abandoned. At the beginning, Ben and Sue, it looked like they were going to be part of this love triangle with Reed, and in reality, they just kind of abandoned that plot point. It's one of a number of things that were just abandoned along the way that, honestly, I think were probably better. Another one is that in the first issue, where do you think the Fantastic Four are from? You're saying New York, aren't you? I bet you think it's New York. It's not. It is Central City, which I think might upset a certain Scarlet Speedster. Either way. Yeah, they just, by issue 2, they were just in New York. It's just easier that way, and it's part of what makes the Marvel Universe charming, is that they're not making up towns for the most part to be in. It's our world, so it works out really well. Now, considering that Ben is the main character for the most part, the one with the biggest arc of this first year, at the beginning he is really unlikable, and I understand what Lee and Kirby were trying to do. They were trying to make it so that you could get an idea of what he was feeling like having been turned into a monster. He really, really holds Reed accountable for this, hates Reed for several issues, and people react to him with genuine fright at first, so I can understand kind of where he's coming from, but they make him so very unlikable and so very difficult to get along with that it was hard for me to really jump in at first. However, that all kind of changes with issue 5. Issue 5 does a lot of great things, but the best thing it does is introduce Dr. Doom to the Marvel Universe. I love Dr. Doom, and let me tell you, this is not a disappointment. He kidnaps Sue, which then causes him to kidnap the rest of the Fantastic Four, and brings them to his castle, and basically says, you will go back in time to steal Blackbeard's treasure for me, and if you do, then I'll let all of you go. And the thing about this plan that's kind of great is that it's not like, even if, they capture him, what are they going to do? Go to the police and say, yeah, he made us travel back in time to steal treasure from a pirate? Doom is much different than so many of the other villains, particularly the Miracle Man so far, and even the Skrulls, or the Mole Man that we've already seen, because his plans are so nuanced and interesting in a way that, quite frankly, everybody else just wants to take over the world vaguely, whereas Doom sort of knows what he wants to do. In this case, in that treasure, there are gems that used to belong to Merlin that he could use to supplement his magical power. They also do a lot of work stressing the sort of science-magic connection with Doom, how he is both a super scientist and a master sorcerer, and that's part of what makes him so terrifying. I really just loved the introduction, and that also was a turning point for Ben, because, spoiler for a comic from 1962, it turns out that Ben is Blackbeard. And that sort of gives him more of a sense of being a person with value, because people, they worshipped him. He was the captain of their ship. They thought that he was a great man in a sort of way, even though he's a pirate, he's a murderer, he's a thief. But still, it showed that people could respect him, and that made him feel respected. I sort of loved that about that story, on top of the introduction of Doom and his time platform, and all the other sort of rigmarole that I will get into later. Another thing about issue 5 that I particularly like is that you start to see some of the personality that we would get out of these characters going forward. Johnny, you get to see him be a bit of a hothead. Sue is more rational and is able to draw the other three back in. Reed is surprisingly good with kids. There's a great scene where they're answering fan mail and he finds out that he got a letter from a kid who's in the hospital across the street. So he stretches across the street and goes to the kid's window and just starts chatting with him. It's the kind of thing that I really like seeing, particularly since I've always loved Reed Richards, and I hate it when he's portrayed as cold or distant or unfeeling. He's not. He's a dreamer. He's always looking to the future. He wants the best of humanity, so he sees the best in humanity, and I adore that about him, and about issue 5 is when we start to see this happening. We also get to see one particularly meta issue in which they are answering their fan mail, but it's, letters of people who wrote into Fantastic Four comics, not people who wrote to the Fantastic Four. And in one of the letters, or for like a page, or at least half a page, they're talking about somebody has written in asking why Sue is on the teams that she never seems to do anything. And they actually took the time to say, well, no, she saved our lives here and here and here, all stuff that was actually in there. Sue is an integral part of this team. She's not just the girl of the team. And in many ways, Sue Storm is, yes, a typical 60s woman being portrayed in media. However, in many ways she's not. She doesn't mix it up with the bad guys as much as the Human Torch or the Thing or Reed. Part of the problem is that her invisibility power at this point is just invisibility. It's not the force fields that we eventually get used to with her. But still, she does do a lot in this first run and this first year, and I am really excited to see her develop kind of more than anybody else at this point. As we go through the series, Kirby's lines get a lot crisper and he seems to get more comfortable with the characters. About 6 or 7 issues in, they start to take on more of the shapes that we're used to seeing them in, and again, Ben becomes more than just a blob. Reed has less of a square jaw, sort of generic look, and more of a distinctive facial shape. Johnny turns into less of just a teenager and somebody that you could pick out of a crowd. Sue tries new hairstyles. No, she's better too, but her eyes, they haunt me. And that stays basically throughout the whole thing. The introduction of Alicia Masters changes everything for Ben. Suddenly there's a woman who loves him. She's blind. For those who don't know, she's blind. She's a sculptor. And she fell in love with Ben. And they start dating, apparently off panel. Like, suddenly she's there and they're dating the next issue. Okay. But either way, it sort of works and it helps Ben come back a little bit. Over the course of this year, he does spend a lot of time softening up, and he eventually learns to forgive Reed because he knows that Reed is trying his best to help him. And he starts to accept who he is, the ever-loving blue-eyed thing. We eventually get to that, but, at first it's, you got the Yancey Street Gang. They're sort of introduced in this. They keep sending him threatening letters, and he sends threatening letters back, and it becomes this whole thing. It's eventually a part of his character. One of my favorite things he did was he took a piece of metal, I think it was steel titanium, or titanium, something like that, and he folds it in half. He says, "Send this to Yancey Street Gang. Tell them when they unroll it, I'll come and thank them in person." It was kind of cool. But yeah, no, Alicia Masters softens Ben up. He becomes more of a jokester. He's not always miserable. He's not always angry. I actually have a theory about the anger in the sense that I think the cosmic rays actually increases anger in some people. Because if you recall, the cosmic rays are also why the Hulk went from a day-night transition to a rage-based transition. Because initially the Hulk was day-night. He was the Hulk at night, he was Bruce Banner during the day. But yeah, then he got sent into space and boom, cosmic rays, and suddenly it's an anger-based transition. So I'm thinking that might have something to do with it there. But either way, it was good to see Ben be likable again, and I can understand his pain more because he's not constantly giving into it. It was a nice transition. And I gotta give Lee and Kirby credit for that, particularly since they did so little else in this first year, but they gave us that and it was so well done. Again, particularly for the time period, I was just very, very impressed. Also, I kind of liked that Lee and Kirby put themselves in an issue as the people who make Fantastic Four comics in the Marvel Universe. You never see their faces, but they talk to each other and refer to each other by name, and then Doctor Doom shows up at their office and forces them to call Reed in, and Reed's all like, but I already had a meeting with them about the new comic. It's fun. It's just a little thing that they do. Okay, so let's just go through some of the stuff I really liked, some of the stuff I didn't like, and some stuff that is important to the Marvel Universe that got introduced in the comics at this point. Reed going from "we gotta beat the commies" in issue 1 to saying that instead of a space race, we should be exploring space as a united humanity. It's a nice sentiment, more in line with the Reed that I would come to know and love. Reed visiting a kid who wrote him a fan letter in the hospital and talking about science. Everything about Doom, including a passing mention that the experiment that ruined his face was an attempt to gaze into the netherworld. This would be used by later writers to develop the story that he was looking to save the soul of his mother. Ben finding out he was Blackbeard. The rest of the team trying to keep Ben out of Reed's lab while Reed works on a possible cure for the thing. Also, Reed's later explanation that he didn't want Ben to get his hopes up in case it didn't work because he's been through so much already. The love triangle that does develop between Reed, Sue, and Namor. Sue having to deal with things women do today, like randos demanding she smile for them on the street. Hey, that's a thing, but glad Kirby and Lee knew this was a thing, at least back in 1962. Namor running a movie studio. This visual reference in Marvel 2-in-1 number 5 to issue 1. This out-of-context panel that looks like Reed is going to seduce Namor. The Miracle Man. Oh, this whole book was lazy and everybody in it seems dumb. The Impossible Man. The FF could have avoided this problem by talking, but they go right to threats. The whole thing is really forced. Their origin. The Baxter Building. The Fantasticar. Costumes of unstable molecules. The 3 Skrulls who turned into cows that come back in the Kree-Skrull War 20 years later. Also, Skrulls. Doom. The return of Namor. Lady Dorma, Namor's true love, who does not deal with his crap. Giganto. Doom's time platform. Alicia Masters. The blue area of the moon. And of course, the Watcher. He didn't have a name at this point. So there we go. The first year of Fantastic Four plus an annual. Did I like it? Yes. Yes, I did. Like I said, those first 4 issues were rough, but for the most part, they do a really wonderful job of moving the story forward and giving us characters that we would eventually come to like. Now, I might be using my foreknowledge of these comics and knowing where these characters are going to put a little bit of bias on this opinion, but still, I think that if you have at least a basic idea of who the Fantastic Four are now, or will be in the very near future, then you can get a lot out of this because it's interesting to see kind of where they've come from and how they get to where they go. There's a lot of very subtle character development and some wonderful moments in these first few issues that give you an idea of why these books can be so magical. The one thing that's disappointing to me is that so far they haven't done any real exploring, and that would be what they become known for, but you gotta baby steps. Baby steps. Either way, it's an auspicious start, and I can't wait to see what happens next. As soon as I find out, you will too. In the meantime, stay fantastic, and I will catch you cool cats later. Take care. I know what you're thinking. How can I help Karu weaponize Nutella?
Well, fear not. You can make that dream come true by donating only $1 or $2 to our Patreon, which will also make you eligible for fabulous prizes! If you can't contribute financially, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and especially sharing with your friends. It costs you nothing and goes a long way toward helping the channel grow, reaching new people who, like you, think that comics are literature. Thank you.